Once again, welcome to the Middle Tennessee Sierra Club August program. Our presenter tonight is Randy Hedgepath, our current Tennessee naturalist. He will be sharing stories about the late Mack Prichard. And just to give you an understanding of how much good Mack Prichard has done for the state of Tennessee, the then governor of Tennessee, Phil Bredesen, on May 24th, 2008, signed a Senate Joint Resolution 1007 commending Mack's half-century as the conservation conscience of Tennessee, and he gave him the official title of Tennessee State Park Naturalist Emeritus. And then later, Governor Bill Lee, in appreciation and celebration of Prichard's life, designated March 31st, 2021 as Mack S. Prichard Day. So we are really excited to learn more about him and very honored to have Randy present for us. Thank you, Randy. So here's the agenda tonight. You can read it on your own. We do have a brief introduction on Sierra Club, County of the Month presentation, then the presentation, and an interactive Q&A. So, brief introduction on Sierra Club. All right, so Sierra Club's been around since 1892. We have about 3.8 million members around the country, and they all support and defend everyone's right to a healthy world. Our Middle Tennessee group has around 3,309 members, and that covers 29 counties. We host group hikes and outings, and of course they are on hold right now. You know, it says until September 21, but to be honest with you, considering how COVID's going, I feel like it's going to be a little bit longer, but we don't know. We're going to cross our fingers. As soon as we're allowed, we're going to open that door back up. We also provide environmental educational programs like this one. We work on a variety of conservation issues at the state and at the local level and even at the national level. We try to influence legislation and environmental policies, and we take an active role in addressing conservation issues in public forums, and we encourage others to do the same. We really encourage you to become a member because you will get these amazingly informative emails. They send out great newsletters, lots of information that Sierra Club, the national, provides, plus also the Tennessee chapter provides an enormous amount of information, and so does Middle Tennessee. There is a website, and we have a Facebook account. We also have a Twitter and an Instagram. So I'm going to post those out here in just a little bit into the chat, so you can grab that later. We are trying to do our part to help combat climate change and to heal the environment, and we need some help doing it. We have some great programs coming up. Just the program team needs some assistance, but the Middle Tennessee group in general could definitely use some volunteers. Since we're in COVID, most of this is digital work, research, finding additional presentations, themes for presentations, marketing, newsletter articles, social media. So if you like to do stuff like that, we try not to overwhelm you with lots of extra work, but if you're inspired by it, we could definitely use your help. When this presentation moves back out into an in-person presentation, we're going to need additional help for audio video setups and just setting the room up in hospitality. There is also a need for just a person to work with Middle Tennessee group on their standard newsletter. they will be publishing information about the program that we have, but also other initiatives that the Middle Tennessee group is doing. They will fully train you. There's some really smart, diligent individuals that work with this, that volunteer currently with the Sierra Club. So we're gonna train you and get you productive as soon as possible. So there's a link at the bottom of this page. You can go to that. I will post this out on the chat too. So please go to that. There's a form you fill out and just submit it. Make sure you put, if you're interested in any of these, then make sure that you're interested in assisting in our monthly program. Okay, thank you. So let's talk about the county of the month. We have 29 counties, and it's easy for us because the majority of us live here in Davidson County or in Nashville to just concentrate on one and just know about our specific region around us. But we try now every month to concentrate on one county and learn a little bit more about it. And this month, our county is Robertson County. So Robertson County is located here at the very top of the state of Tennessee, close to the, right on the Kentucky border. And here is a terrain map that shows where it's physically located. It is in the, it's on the northern part of the central, the northern central section of the Central or Nashville Basin. So this is all the Nashville Basin or the Central Basin. It is also on the northern, I guess there's a western Highlands and there's an eastern Highlands. So I didn't quite know what that was. Maybe one of the others. Didn't really say. So anyway, it's part of the Highlands. And its substrata is primarily limestone. There are 169 caves located. There's three mines listed here. There's a ton of creeks and no rivers, though I thought was interesting. There's creeks and branches of creeks, so smaller areas. Only about 0.04% of the entire county is water. Its highest oh my gosh. The highest point is 1,089 feet. The lowest point is 550 feet. And the overall population of this county is 72,000, which means it's got 145 people per square mile. So, and here are the various cities. Springfield is the county seat, Adams, Cedar Hill, Cross Plains, Greenbrier, Millersville, and so on. It is, and I didn't even know this, I didn't know that Robertson County was considered to be part of the Nashville metropolitan area, which I guess that makes sense because Nashville's here. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Right here, this is that whole area is part of that. Okay. So here are some very pretty pictures of the region. This is the courthouse for Springfield. They are known for the world's finest dark-fired tobacco. Here's a picture of White Horse. And of course, their most famous, at least nationwide, is the story of the Bell Witch. So please look that up if you get a chance. It's pretty fascinating, a little scary, very scary, but interesting. Okay, so here is the county, and there is a Cedar Hill Swamp Wildlife Management Area, and then the Port Royal State Park. So check those out when you get a chance to go up to Robertson County. All right, let's get to the presentation. All right, so tonight we're remembering Mack Prichard. So, and tonight our presenter, once again, is Randy Hedgepath. Randy has been a state naturalist for 12, going on 13 years, and an employee of the state as a park ranger for 25 years. He has served as a ranger naturalist at the South Cumberland Radnor Lake State Park. He was appointed state naturalist for Tennessee state parks in 2007. He is a graduate of UT Martin and the former National Parks Service interpretive specialist. Randy is one of the most sought after interpretive specialists in the southeast of the United States. And if you don't know what that is, they make our visits to the park more memorable. They use sound and video and photos and other means to make park tours interesting and informative. A park interpretive specialist explains the historical relationship that occurs between humans, animals, and plants. But tonight, he's just going to tell us all about Mack Prichard. And he knew him for many years, so it'll be wonderful to hear his stories about Mack Prichard. So I'm going to pass the screen sharing over to Randy.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Talking about Mack is something that I never refused to do because he was a mentor and a friend and an inspiration for me from an early day. And I thought about what I was going to do for this program, and I could talk about the environmental conservation organizations that he started. It would be easier to list the ones he didn't have a hand in founding, really, because he's involved in most of them. About the only one that I can come up with that he didn't have anything to do with founding was the TOS, the Tennessee Ornithological Society, which was founded way before he was born. So he couldn't have had anything to do with founding that one. But he had a hand in just about all the others, including the Tennessee Sierra Club. He grew up in West Tennessee. Most of you know the facts of his life. Raised in Dyersburg and in Memphis, and his parents were outdoors people, and his dad took him fishing and hunting and taught him all about the natural world as a child. And he went to college at Southwestern, which is a pretty prestigious school. It's now called the Rhodes College. And he went on and got a master's degree at Tulane in anthropology in the 1960s. And to me, this picture here kind of screams 1960s, the style and all. Is Mack celebrating, taking a self-portrait with the magazine from the newspaper, the Sunday paper magazine, featuring an article about him. He was proud of that. But he told me that what started him in doing conservation work was he was interested in Indians, and he had read about mound groups all over West Tennessee and eastern Arkansas. I was saying that Mack grew up in West Tennessee, and his dad took him to his favorite place, which I think was one of Mack's very favorite places too, because he talked about it so much. Reelfoot Lake. He took me on a grand tour more than once and showed me wonderful places at Reelfoot Lake. And there are many Indian sites at Reelfoot Lake. And when Mack was 15, he told me that he heard about a public meeting that was occurring over in Arkansas. So it might come as a surprise to some of you that his first foray into conservation work was in Arkansas. But he asked his dad to take him over to Parkin, Arkansas for a public meeting. It seems that the Indian mound there in Parkin was owned by this fella who was being asked by the highway department to sell him the mound, to the highway department so they could use it as fill material for the highway going through the town. And Mack was very upset about this, and he wanted to go and speak in favor of preserving the mound. So he told me he asked his dad to take him over there. And when it come his time to speak, he said he stood up and he was terrified. He was scared absolutely to death but he walked up to the lectern and talked about what he had been thinking about all those days preparing for it, how they're not making any more of these. This is a unique, historic thing that we should treasure. And he spoke all that way, and then went and sat down, relieved that it was over. And then the meeting ended, and people were talking, and the landowner came over to Mack and said, "Young man," shook his hand and said, "You know, you are right. They are not making any more of these, and it is kind of priceless in that way. So I think the highway department can find someplace else to get fill material. I will work toward preserving this Indian mound." And Mack said he was just thrilled that that had come about. And he's thinking to himself, this is great. I wonder if I can make this a career. And he started pursuing it from that point at 15 years old. Parkin Mound is a single mound that was visited by Hernando de Soto. De Soto put up a cross on top of the mound. It's very historic. It was the capital of a mound group all along the St. Francis and its tributary river. And after that public meeting, it was preserved and it became a state park. And here shows the mound group that Mack most likely knew all about, the Parkin site being the capital of this group of mound or village areas. When it came that there were Indian mounds near his home over in Memphis, he went out to see those. And this is called Chucalissa in the T.O. Fuller State Park. Mack said he was out there one day and he had visited the mound, and he was walking out of the park and he got down into the side ditch in an exposed area of soil, and he started looking for artifacts. He knew that it's probably not legal to take those out of the park, but he was looking to see if there were any exposed down there. And he didn't see anything, but he looked up from the side ditch, and there was a park ranger car sitting there with the park manager, Mr. Harris, looking at him. And Mack said, hello. And Mr. Harris says, well, what you doing, young fella? And Mack told him, well, I guess I better fess up. I was looking for Indian artifacts in this bare soil here. Mr. Harris says, really? You interested in that sort of thing? And Mack told him, yes, he was. And Mr. Harris rubbed his chin and looked back at him and said, would you like to have a job? I need somebody to talk about the Indian mounds that are over here in the park. And if you got an interest in that, maybe you can tell people about them. And Mack's first job turned out to be one he won by being in a side ditch looking for Indian artifacts. And Chucalissa was one of the places he was interested in preserving. He worked with archaeologists on the site there and at other sites in the country, in the state of Tennessee. And if you look to the right, that's Mack crouched down there, and he has one of the patches from the early 1960s park ranger uniform on his shoulder there. I have another picture of that coming up later, but he's involved in the dig there at Chucalissa in this photograph. He was also instrumental in preserving the Indian mounds at Pinson, the tallest mound, second tallest mound in the eastern United States, the Saul's Mound. I've heard Mr. Lawrence, our archaeologist, say, well, there's a couple that are about that same height. So saying it's the second largest may not be totally true, but it is an impressive mound for sure. If you've not been to the Pinson Mounds, it's a place that Mack truly loved. Another area that he worked hard to save was Mound Bottom, surrounded by the Harpeth River in Cheatham County. The ceremonial mound you see here has several little mounds around it. 800 years ago, there was a large village with nearly 1,000 people living there. And Mack drew up plans to have an interpretive center just across the river from Mound Bottom. and a bridge over to the archaeological site. That was going to be the way they did it. Tell people about the mounds and its history, and then cross the bridge across the river and go see it. If you look to the right, in the photograph, you see the bluff over the river, and on top of that is an Indian petroglyph that is also part of the preserved area there at the mountain bottom. It's called Mace Bluff because the petroglyph is of a ceremonial dressed Indian with the sacrificial mace in his hand. Another area that Mack worked on to try to save was a ceremonial site down in Coffee County. The Duck River and the Little Duck River come together around an Indian enclosure. And on June 21st, the mounds that line the side of the entrance going into Old Stone Fort are almost within a degree of perfectly lined up with the summer solstice sunrise. This is a picture that I took of that sunrise, 5:30 in the morning in 2013. After working at T.O. Fuller for a while, Mack became pretty well known for his expertise in talking about Indians and history. So much so that the park manager at Shelby Forest, which became Neiman's Shelby Forest State Park later on, called him up and asked him if he would be willing to come up to Shelby Forest and do some programs. And Mack said, well, of course, do you have a group in mind? And he said, yes, these garden clubs, these garden club ladies want me to lead them on a hike or send a ranger out on a hike with them on their trail. They built this trail over here and it's won on the national award, and they want somebody to lead them on a nature hike on that trail. So Mack's second job was going up to Shelby Forest and taking the garden club ladies for nature walks. That became very important in Mack's life because those garden club ladies grew to love him. And more than once, when he got in trouble by voicing a concern that wasn't politically correct with the administration, those garden club ladies saved his job a couple of times or more. So God bless the garden club ladies. This is the plaque on the trail that the garden club won the award for there at Shelby Forest, the Woodland Trail. After Mack became their guide and their nature walks there, they nominated him for a national award with the Garden Club of America as well, and he won that, hands down. And those little old ladies not only saved him from maybe being fired a couple of times, but they also worked together with him to save one of the most precious jewels in Memphis, the old growth forest at Overton Park. Some of those ladies were the ones that the newspapers and the opponents called the little old ladies in tennis shoes, which they embraced. And Mack told them as much as he could about how they could fight the project of I-40, the Interstate 40 going across the top of Overton Park and right through the old growth forest. They fought it. They thought they were losing a couple of times, but eventually with the information that they got from Mack probably, they were able to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And it's the only time in history where a community group has had a judgment in their favor over an interstate highway construction project. So Overton Park, the old growth forest, is still there. So in the 1960s, Governor Clement got a $5 million appropriation voted in with the state legislature. And they told Mack to go out and find the best and the most beautiful places still remaining to become state parks. He wanted to expand the state park system with his $5 million appropriation. Mack liked to tell the story of when one of the legislators asked him, Governor Clement, $5 million to buy parks, is that really necessary? And Clement would return by saying, you know, tourists, they're a lot easier to pick than a bale of cotton. And I think they're worth a whole lot more. So instead of investing in more cotton fields, I believe we ought to invest in more state parks. And sure enough, his wisdom came true, because state parks and recreation and tourism is one of the second, I think I've heard, major industry in the state of Tennessee. So Mack went out trying to find places that could become state parks. Of course, Pinson Mounds and Old Stone Fort were part of that. He recommended. He told me that he got a call from the governor saying, "Hey, we need that master plan for Old Stone Fort right away." And he had to rush and get that done. One of the parks that Mack recommended and they started working on is one of our crown jewels in Upper East Tennessee, the Roan Mountain State Park. The picture here is on the top of the Roan, which is owned by the U.S. Forest Service. The state park is in the foothills down below, with the beautiful cabins and the beautiful trails along the Doe River. So Roan Mountain, Panther Creek, several other state parks, Big Hill Pond, were all acquired during that era with the money that Governor Clement got, and Mack went out and identified where to spend it. So while he was doing that, he became well known for his archaeological expertise. So when the Division of Archaeology was started, they, of course, tapped Mack to be the first state archaeologist. And he did that for about 3 years and got the department off to got the division off to a great start. He said he was a little under duress. He didn't want to be the state archaeologist. He wanted to be the state naturalist or travel doing programs. But he got to do that again later on. But he went from state archaeologist to state natural areas administrator. When the Natural Areas Act was passed in 1971, they of course thought of the person that knew the most about natural areas and tapped him to be the administrator of natural areas for a couple of years. This is Mack speaking at one of those areas, Radnor Lake. As a matter of fact, Radnor Lake was the reason they got the Natural Areas Act passed. Mack and a lot of people were fighting to save Radnor Lake, and the group fighting to get it saved heard about the Natural Areas Act and thought to themselves, that's exactly what we want for Radnor Lake, to keep it as it is, to keep it natural. So when the Friends of Radnor Lake, the Middle Tennessee Conservancy, which turned into the Friends of Radnor Lake, started using their influence, the act got passed. And because of the Natural Areas Act, we now have 85 designated and listed state natural areas statewide, Radnor Lake being the first to be included. Mack came up with a list of 10 areas that ought to be included as natural areas if the act passed. And when it did, they started working on getting those 10 areas. Radnor Lake was the first area designated as a state natural area. And Radnor Lake today is still natural. It is a little bit crowded, but it is a great place to go and see wildlife, go and see the redbud in bloom in the spring. It is a great flagship for the Natural Areas program. And if you go to Radnor Lake, which we wanted to be at Radnor Lake tonight, but with the concerns, we're virtual instead. But if you go to Radnor Lake, go into the auditorium there in the visitor center and look at the preserving the area display. And you'll see a picture of the Tennessee Tower with the letters Save Radnor Lake with the lights on. You will also see a t-shirt with this logo on it, which is Mack's t-shirt. He donated after the area became a state natural area, when that building was constructed and they needed a t-shirt for the exhibit. John Farshar asked Mack, and he donated his personal t-shirt that he wore during the campaign to save Radnor Lake, and you can see it there. He swore to me that he washed it before he brought it out there, but nobody's checked it for sure. One of the biggest campaigns to save an area that Mack was involved in was another one of those on his list of potential state natural areas, and that was Savage Gulf. This is Savage Falls at the head of Savage Gulf. Mack went to a conference. He asked his supervisor in the 1960s who, well, I can't think of his name right at the moment, but he asked if he could go to a natural areas conference in Minnesota. And when he was up there at the Natural Areas Conference, a gentleman from Germany walked up to him and asked him if he was from Tennessee. He said yes. And he asked, well, what are you doing there in Tennessee to preserve May Prairie and Savage Gulf? And Mack was surprised at this because he had never heard of either one of those areas. But when he got back to Tennessee, he started researching and finding out that, yes, if these areas are known on the other side of the world by naturalists, there must be something special about them. So he started the campaign to acquire Savage Gulf. He got May Prairie acquired as one of the first 10 state natural areas and fulfilled the desire of the naturalists from the other side of the world to save those areas. Mack would go out and check it out himself first. He walked the North Rim, the South Rim, the Collins Gulf, the Big Creek Gulf. The first area that was saved in the 1960s was the Plateau Top, where you could walk out along the edge to the Great Stone Door. And then after the Natural Areas Act was passed, they bought this gulf here, which has 500 acres of mixed mesophytic old growth forest. Mixed mesophytic means it is so diverse, so many different kinds of trees. You can't say it's an oak hickory or a maple beech. You got to say it's a mixed forest. And mesophytic means medium moisture. So the medium moisture habitat with this variety of trees, one of those most diverse natural habitats in North America, second only to the coves of the Great Smoky Mountains. Mack would go backpacking and checking it out. I saw a hand-drawn map that he showed me one time where he was bushwhacking along the side of the Collins Gulf, which is the middle one of the three that make up the Savage Gulf Natural Area, acquired later on, but he knew about it from the beginning and hoped it would be acquired eventually. He wrote down Noisy Falls and pinpointed on the map where he heard the waterfall, and it turned out to be Horsepound Falls that some of you might have walked to at the Savage Gulf Natural Area. So not only did he go out and walk it himself, but he started taking anybody that would go and showing them this wonderful place. And later on, after Mack was successful in getting the state to acquire the Savage Gulf, I started working at South Cumberland, which Savage Gulf was a unit of. So this is a younger picture of me and my wife, Jill, on the North Rim Trail, walking in Mack's footsteps, you might see, at Savage Gulf. He would hike in, take people to the waterfall, take people to the overlooks. And then he had this idea, how about taking the governor? People told him, well, that'll never happen. But he was related sort of in-law to Governor Winfield Dunn. And when he went by one day, Governor Dunn was kind of frazzled from dealing with the legislators and needed a break. And Mack said, well, what about taking a walk in the woods? And he proposed this trip. And the governor said yes. So they walked, they rode horses, they rode in a Jeep, and they got the governor all the way to the bottom of the gorge of Savage Gulf. And this picture and other pictures were on the newspaper's front page. Governor supports acquisition of Savage Gulf Natural Area, and it got done. This is a picture of the old growth, the large tulip poplar tree that's at the base of the climb down, right next to Savage Creek. That's Governor Dunn on the far left. On the far right is Dr. Elsie Quarterman, the botany professor, chairman of the biology department at Vanderbilt University, that had written a paper about the value of that mixed mesophytic virgin forest. So it eventually got all pieced together. In 1978, the J.M. Huber Corporation sold us another 3,800 acres to match the 3,800 acres that Mack got from the Werner Lumber Company, the Warner Boyd Lumber Company. And another thing that Mack had his sights on was the Greeter Falls over in Altamont. He had drawn up a plan and had secured the funding to buy the land around the waterfall and all the way out to the highway but it got cut for some reason. The money was not all there, or they wanted to use some of the money for something else, and they cut back the boundary of it now. So we now have a subdivision between the highway and the waterfall, but we do have the waterfall preserved like Mack wanted. During this time of fighting for Savage Gulf and trying to save other areas, Mack met a fellow named Michael Frome, and he went on several excursions with Mr. Frome. He was famous for being an author, and one of the books he had written was about the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which you see here. And Mr. Frome, Mack said, was a little impatient. He remembers walking along and looking at stuff, and Michael getting a little upset with him. And one day Mack said, Michael just threw up his hands and says, "You know what your problem is, Mack Prichard?" And Mack says, "No, Michael, what is my problem?" "You are interested in everything. We'll never get anywhere if you look at everything along the trail." Mack said, "Well, I guess you're right about that." But he kept looking at things and stepped up a little bit for Michael. Later on, he took Michael to the Great Stone Door, talking about the Savage Gulf, the Collins Gulf across the way there, Savage Gulf behind that dark mountain. On the top of this rock here, Michael was out looking at the view, and Mack took his picture on top of that rock and made it into a postcard that was used as one of the one of the tools to get the word out about saving Savage Gulf. Mack also talks about the Burgess family having a picnic every year and seeing the waterfall and marveling at the beauty of it. And eventually that became one of our first 10 state natural areas as well. Some people say the most beautiful waterfall in Tennessee. One night, Mack was at Cumberland Mountains staying the night on a programming trip, and he took a walk out to Ozone Falls, which was another one of our first state natural areas. It was dark, so Mack took his camera and his tripod, and he set up his tripod and opened up the camera and let it stay open, taking in the light from the moon for a half an hour. And I still remember that slide that he used extensively in a lot of his programs of the mystical looking Ozone Falls coming down in the light of the moon. One of those serendipity programs that Mack got into. Another jewel very close by was the Black Mountain. And with the Tennessee Parks and Greenways Foundation, now known as 10 Green, started working on the project. Black Mountain purchased from the Methodist Church and saved for a part of the Cumberland Trail. It wasn't just saving land that Mack got into. There were other things as well. Close to home for me, I have an office at Montgomery Bell State Park, and Mack's project at Montgomery Bell was a trail project. He had a friend that was working for the Department of Corrections and called him and asked if he had anything that they could get the young men there in the detention center to do. And Mack said, yes, we need some extra trails. We need some trails maintained at Montgomery Bell State Park. That's not too far for them to ride. So they came out, they worked several days, weeks even, on the trail system. And Mack said that more than one of those boys turned their life around by having the experience of working out in a beautiful forest in a beautiful state park. And there were some losses, some failures in acquiring land, one of which was the head of the Sequatchie, where the Sequatchie River comes out of the mountainside, full size, and the beautiful Devil Step Hollow Cave, which is a karst window down into that underground river that comes out down at the head of Sequatchie Spring. It was one of those areas that Mack identified as worthy of being a state park, but they failed to get it. And for 20 years, you know, it was, well, we wish we had gotten that, but it became available again. The people that bought it eventually put it on the market to sell. And this time, Mack and the Tennessee Parks and Greenways Foundation, 10 Green, were ready, and they got grants and things together, and then the state secured it for a part of the Cumberland Trail. This, I'm sure, was attractive to Mack, this cave, because it's one of the most significant archaeological sites anywhere. Ceremonial happened inside of this cave where they carved a ceremonial figure on the wall. There's even a footprint in the mud. It is very, very sensitive. So no one is allowed to go in there, because even your breath deteriorates the historic value of that archaeological site. But it is known about. And Mack would be proud, I think. We're considering having pictures that were taken in the past and making a virtual tour so that people don't have to go in to see what it looks like in there. Another loss that turned into a success was here in Jackson County, where the Blackburn Fork River goes over the eighth biggest waterfall in the state of Tennessee. Mack thought that would be a great park, but they failed to get it. And it was slated for development in the early 2000s. And in 2008, they had drawn up plans for home sites all around the top of the bluff there, overlooking the waterfall. And anybody remember what happened in 2008? Well, you might say that the plans fell through for the development because of the financial situation of the country. And I contributed one little thing. Driving along the interstate, I saw a billboard advertising Cummins Falls for auction. So I called Kathleen Williams and the 10 Green people, and they came down and participated in the auction. And one of their members forwarded the money, or promised the money to buy it if they just kept bidding. So today we have Cummins Falls State Park because of Mack, because of the 10 Green people showing up. And when the waterfall was made into a state park, we had to have a ceremony to celebrate. So here is the ceremony to celebrate the new state park, Cummins Falls State Park. And they asked Mack to talk about it. And he gave a very inspiring speech. I remember, I wish I had recorded it. It was wonderful. Then they gave pictures to some of the other participants. Mack's part was my favorite anyway. And then he gave up the stage, and they started giving out the framed photographs to the governor, Governor Haslam on the left there, and the head of the TWRA in the middle, Ed Carter, and our commissioners over to the right. And you look at there, Mack sneaking around trying to get that best picture in the foreground. Mack told me this story about, he had a friend that had an airplane, and he would invite Mack to go with him on little flights. And Mack took him up on it several times. One of those flights was across the Cumberland Plateau, White County, Cumberland County, and he was looking down at a forest that seemed to go on and on and on, and thinking to himself, wow, this is great. All these trees still here. I hope they can survive for much longer. And then he saw a little streak of silver among the green trees. And he asked the pilot if he would curve around and do a little bit closer pass. And what he was seeing was water seemingly coming out of the forest and going back into the forest. He had found Virgin Falls, another karst window where an underground stream comes out of a cave on the top, falls 110 feet into a sinkhole at the bottom. Virgin Falls. And it became a small wild area for quite a while by the original owners. But eventually, it has now become fully protected under the State Natural Areas Act. It wasn't one of the original state natural areas, but it is on the list now. And here's a young fella that really shouldn't have been shooting guns in the park, but this is me on my first park job at David Crockett State Park, playing the part of David Crockett. During my college years, I got to do that. I was majoring in stuff like that. And I I was a member of the Park and Recreation Administration Club, and we were a part of the School of Agriculture. So there were farm guys in our classes all the time. And we had once a year a big banquet of the entire agriculture school. And every year they picked one curriculum to come up with a speaker. You probably know where I'm going with this. They picked Park and Recreation in my junior year there in college. And somebody in our meeting to decide who we were going to ask to be the speaker at this banquet, somebody said, well, let's get Mack Prichard. And at that point, I had not heard of him. But I agreed with them. They said he was good, so we invited him. He showed up in this outfit, and he got up in front of this huge auditorium full of mainly farm boys, farm girls, and a few of us natural resource people over on the side. He gave an eloquent talk about the beauty of Tennessee, especially West Tennessee, where we were at UT Martin. He talked about the problems like erosion or pesticide use, and made the farm boys squirm in their chairs. And then at the end of that, he would flash up a picture of something beautiful. And when he got toward the end of the program, he flashed up a picture of this guy and went, woo, 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 woo. And I saw farm boys jumping out of their chair. They had never seen such a thing. And Max looked around at all of them now standing up and said, you know, we all need to give a hoot about conservation. And from that day on, I was inspired to maybe do that for a living, become a conservationist, give programs, lead hikes. So that was the night that I had decided what kind of park ranger I wanted to be. I wanted to be a park ranger naturalist, like the guy that I had seen, Mack Prichard. And many years after that, when Mack would see me and I didn't see him yet, he would give a hoot, like from a barred owl, and I would recognize who it was and hoot back. The rangers at Radnor Lake, we communicated across the lake like that. If we saw the other ranger on the other side of the lake, we would hoot and they would hoot back. Communication between naturalists, you might say, using the barred owl language that Mack taught us. So on one of our, when I got this lucky break. I had been a park ranger and naturalist at South Cumberland and Radnor Lake for 25 years. And Mack was thinking about retiring, but he wouldn't do it until he got a promise from the director at that time, Mike Carlton, that they would continue on having somebody called the State Naturalist. So Mack had some people in mind, and he talked to some of them. And when he brought the subject up with me, he said, would you like to be State Naturalist? Could my successor in traveling the state and spreading the gospel of nature? And at first I go, oh, no, yes, of course. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I was very flattered, and he took me under his wing, and we started traveling the state together for over a year, and him showing me all the places and showing me groups that he had helped start. So we went to their meetings, we did programs, we stopped at Reelfoot Lake and communed with a barred owl in the picture here, and had a wonderful apprentice year traveling with Mack in 2007. One of our trips was to Reelfoot Lake, where he talked about his boyhood exploring the wetlands there. This is at Walnut Log, where he's taking a picture of one of the beaver dams on the upper part of the lake. He loved Reelfoot Lake. So he traveled around speaking to all these groups, and he never had to have a prompt to get a conversation started. A very talkative sort, but he had this jacket here that had all the patches on it all over, and that was a prompt for a lot of people. Would come up and say, "Oh, you are you a member of this organization?" And he would say, "Well, I helped start that organization, and maybe I can steer you to another organization that is well worth your time as well." So we went all over the place, and people loved to stop and talk to Mack. One of his favorite places that I shared a love for was the Fiery Gizzard. I took a swim here on my first day as a park ranger in 1983. This is Sycamore Falls on the Fiery Gizzard. And there was a big portion of the gorge below this that was still private property. It was owned by Mr. Werner, who had been the one that sold us Savage Gulf. So there was a prospect of Mr. Werner selling another big piece of land with the Fiery Gizzard Trail on it. So Mack and I went down, and there was a group of local people that had invited us to come and walk with them down into the gorge. And we walked down into the gorge, well, stumbled or controlled fall, really, down into the gorge. It was extremely rugged. There was no trail. We went bushwhacking. And on the way, after we looked around at the bottom and marveled at the beauty of the place, this group that we were with kind of abandoned us. They took off up the side of the mountain, and Mack and I started struggling up, and it took us about twice as long to get out as it did those folks, but we made it out. And we looked at each other when we got to the top saying, we might be getting to the end of doing something like that anymore. But we survived just fine. And Mack told me a story. This is my favorite Mack Prichard story, by the way. I don't know how I'm doing on time. But this is a story about the Fiery Gizzard that Mack has told me, and I have used it many times. It's about this plant here. Mack said that he was on his way to Chattanooga to talk to a garden club group, and he had all day to get there. So he stopped by Tracy City and went down into the Fiery Gizzard and was looking around, and you know, he forgot about time. So eventually he looked at his watch and, I'm out of time. As a matter of fact, I may be late unless I can get out of here pretty quickly. So he thought to himself, how's the fastest way to get out of here? The trail is pretty slow going. I know, I'll just climb up the side of the mountain here. The gorge is not very deep at this point, and I know there's a road up there that I can walk back out to my car, and I'll make it out in half the time. So he did that. He climbed up the side of the mountain, and he got to the top, and he came out, and instead of the road, he came out into a backyard. And there was a lady on the back porch doing something, shelling beans or whatever. But she saw this guy in a uniform step out of the woods, and immediately she stood up and yelled at him, "Hey, what are you doing?" And Mack tried to explain to her, "Yeah, I'm State Naturalist. I'm sorry, I'm trespassing. I'm just trying to get to the Langford Road over here to get back. I'm kind of late for my appointment." And the lady says, "Well, what are you doing out there in them woods?" And Mack had to explain some more. He said, "Well, ma'am, I'm kind of in a hurry, but I was kind of studying plants." "Really?" the lady says. "You know about plants?" "Well, yes, ma'am, I know quite a bit about plants." She said, "Well, have you ever heard of an Indian turnip?" And Mack thought and had never heard that term before, and said, "Well, no, ma'am." "Well, there's one right there," she says. And he looks over and he sees, "Oh, well, I've always called that the Jack in the Pulpit." "Ah," the lady says, kind of softening her tone a little bit, thinking that, well, maybe he is a plant expert. But she went on to say, "You know, we call it Indian turnip because you can eat the root." "Really?" Mack said. So he looked at his watch, and curiosity got the best of him, and he said, "Can I dig that one up and see the turnip?" She said, "Yeah, go right ahead." So he dug it up and knocked all the dirt off of it and held it up and asked her one more time, "Can you eat this?" And she said, "Yes." So he made a bad mistake by biting into it. Instantly, he felt like there was a needle injected into every cell of his mouth, and he's trying to get it out. It's spitting and wiping it out. And he looked over, and there was one of those outdoor faucets, and he ran over there, turned on the water, and made a worse mistake than he had previously, because the oxalate in the roots of this plant is activated by water. So he now feels terrible pain, and he's trying to get it out. And he noticed the lady back in her rocking chair, and she's up there laughing her head off. And he's thinking to himself, well, maybe I won't make it to my program because I'm going to kill this woman. Well, I better not do that, he said. So he got to where he could finally talk. So he went up to the porch and said, "Ma'am, that was just awful. Why did you do that to me?" And she quit rocking for a minute, looked at him and said, well, young fella, if you hadn't been in such a hurry, I would have told you had to cook it first. So Mack learned a little bit of botany from the little mountain lady in Tracy City. It turns out that it takes more than just cooking the root to make it edible with a jack in the pulpit. But the moral of the story Mack told me is, when you're studying nature, don't get in a hurry. So Mack, he and I traveled the state, and he was loved everywhere we went. People would come up to him and say, hey, do you remember me? And we did this together, and it was great. Some of our state park rangers owed a lot of their experience to Mack and inspiration, like our own Bobby Fulcher was another protege of Mack. And wherever we went, he was loved and adored by all. And this is a lady that she and her husband were instrumental in getting the Bridgestone Firestone Wilderness area in White County together. So Mack was very excited about having them there at his presentation. So he and I had a great time for that last year. And eventually, I had this experience where this is my grandson, Ezra, and I would talk about him during our trips together. And he confided in me that he wished he had had a child of his own, like I did, but he didn't. So he regretted that. But I kind of told him, well, you know, Mack, you're kind of like a father to all us park rangers. Here are park rangers that I and David and some of our other present park rangers have trained. They're kind of like Mack's grandchildren. So we all owe a debt to who came before us, Mack Prichard, who inspired me and taught me, and I'm passing that on to the younger generation. I hope you all will enjoy the presentation this evening.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you very much, Randy. That was a beautiful presentation.
Randy, that was great. You are definitely in Mack's mold.
Thank you so much for that. You know, one of the greatest compliments that he ever gave me was my father-in-law was Dr. Charles Farrell, and I did a program at the request of the Ornithological Society about Dr. Farrell one night, and Mack showed up, which made me nervous right away. But he was watching the program. I was talking about Dr. Farrell and how he influenced so many people, and he was a great naturalist, even though he was really a college professor. And after the program, Mack came up and said, that was wonderful, Randy. You did a great job. And having that come from Mack was one of the greatest compliments I've ever had received.
We're going to open it up for questions now. So I just had to show this one image. I thought that was hilarious when I saw that. So congratulations, Randy, for having your own beer. So does anyone have any questions?
Well, I think since both Lisa and Sheila are on this Zoom, you ought to tell about Mack's celebration of life coming up in October.
Yeah, we're having a dedication of the new Mack Prichard Visitor Center at Cummins Falls State Park, and celebration of life for Mack at the same time. It'll be in October.
It's October 22nd.
22nd, Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. There at the Cummins Falls Visitor Center.
I think the celebration starts at 12.
Okay. Well, I better get there earlier than I thought then. But yeah, we're afternoon in celebrating Mack, and I think it's wonderful that they have chosen to name the visitor center after him there at Cummins Falls. And you might not have heard the March 31st is now Mack Prichard Day, designated by the legislature. So another day to celebrate Mack's life and accomplishments. Okay. Thank you for the update on the time there, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Cummings Falls is my favorite place to go, and I'm so happy that they preserved it, because I used to go there all the time when I was in college.
Yeah, we park rangers, when we started managing Cummings Falls, we kind of thought to ourselves, what were we thinking? Because it became so popular that there would be like 4,000 people in that pool at the bottom of the falls on a holiday weekend. So that's why now they have come up with a strategy of requiring a permit to go down so that they can regulate. You know, it ruins it for everyone. You know, 4,000 people in that pool, it's no fun for anyone.
No,
So,
I remember when there were 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So preserve and protect. We're looking to do that. And how can we preserve it if we're letting people trample on it all the time? So the permit system seems to be working great. There's been very few evacuations of hurt people since we've started that. So Cummings Falls is, again, a wonderful place to go. And you can always go to the overlook without a permit. But going down to the pool at the bottom, you need to get your permit.
Beautiful space. And so is Burgess Falls. So does anyone else have any questions?
If you have another question later on, you know, I'm going to try to stick around for a while. And after the formal meeting time, you can ask me another question if you want to.
Yeah. If you,
Williams has her hand up.
Hello? Yeah. I have moved to near Reelfoot now. So I'm getting to see, and I've lived in this part of the world for years. My mother was from around this area, but my wonderful Tennessee friends don't have the appreciation of West Tennessee that we have had in the past. And I know the weather has something to do with it. But we have some opportunities here that I don't know how to push. But we have a wonderful potential overlook of Reelfoot Lake. We have a potential hiking trail along the Mississippi River. We have it as biking, I know, but we don't have everything developed or thought even out even. And I'd like some help with pushing some of that.
It's a wonderful idea. I hope we can get those down.
Can I mention something that Scenic Tennessee is doing that I was reminded of it seeing all those vistas, especially when you talked about how Cummings Falls was slated for development. Scenic Tennessee is undertaking it's called a visual resource survey or inventory of Tennessee. It's something that I bet Randy knows about it, but I hadn't really heard about it. But there's a thing, it's like a science of assessing views and view sheds and visual assets and ranking them, really using public input to say what views are most important to them and most central to the identity of a place. And there's it's a very scientific kind of way of going about it. But the point is to then get the data so that local governments, planning commissions, planning boards can know what views matter most in their area and take that into consideration during development, when development questions arise. And so I just want you all to know that this is now kind of underway. It'll take years to complete for the whole state. We're just in the early stages. I'm still learning about it, but I especially was interested in the Upper Cumberlands as a place to do a pilot inventory. So I might want to talk to Randy about that. But if folks can, understand that identifying, like Mack did all the time, know where the great views are, and then rally support for them. So Sue Williams, if this kind of effort in inventorying and mapping and photographing and all that stuff can happen over at the Reelfoot area. There's these aren't, dictatorial studies. They're just advisory, and they absolutely are based on community inputs where folks talk about what they love, what they value for future reference.
Thank you very much. I'll keep that in mind.
And the Chickasaw Bluffs are truly a treasure of Tennessee, and more of it should be preserved.
Does anyone on the call have any stories they would like to share about Mack Prichard?
Yes, I would like to hear more stories.
Yeah. Has anyone on this call other than Randy met him?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I figured I'd start there.
Yeah, I've hiked with him and known him for years.
Yeah, that was a little intimidating when I saw everybody appearing in the gallery, and all of them I knew were friends with Mack. So not much I can tell them that they didn't know already, but maybe the personal experiences with Mack and I were something they didn't know about. So that's the way I went. But a lot of Mack's friends here tonight.
I remember my first trip with Mack was in a state van headed to South Pittsburgh during the chip mill rallies, and I wasn't so sure what I was getting into heading to South Pittsburgh with just not knowing what was going to be there, because it was a little different than Nashville. And all along the way, we couldn't go 20 miles without Mack pointing out something along the way that there was, this is what happened here, and that was what happened there. And it was just really incredible how much he knew.
And how long it would take to get anywhere.
Yeah, Gary and I were talking about this earlier, and I told the story of when my wife was about 14 years old. She went with her dad on a trip, the Middle Tennessee Conservancy, and one of the vans had Mack and Dr. Farrell in it, and the other one didn't. I don't know who was in the other van, but you got Mack in one van. So she said when they stopped for gas or for breaks along the way, people from the other van would come up to her and try to talk her out of her seat on the van that Mack was in so that they could hear the play-by-play as well, too. She said she didn't give up her seat because she was enjoying it so much, and still remembers it to this day.
So, Rita, you have your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
I knew Mack for many, many years. I worked for Sierra Club in the Memphis, Tennessee Environmental Justice Office. A lot of people on this call I know, but for those that don't know me, I was a staff person with Sierra Club for many years, and I'm now retired. But we would have annual conferences and different programs of all kinds, and Mack would just show up. He was so supportive. He would always tell me about the work that he was doing or had done and the natural areas. But he was absolutely wonderful. Sometimes he brought his wife with him. It was just he was a wonderful person. He was very knowledgeable, and I truly miss him. But he was very, I just wanted everyone to know that he was very supportive of the environmental justice program. My work revolved around poor and people of color communities that were dealing with various pollution types, hazardous waste sites, dumps, and all of that. But he was always supportive, and I really appreciate him for that. He was a wonderful friend.
Scott, I can't believe you don't have any stories that you can share. I know there's some you can't.
Well, if you want to share after the program, you're very welcome to. Let's go ahead and move forward. There's a few other things that we want to go over, and then what we'll do is we'll close the program out, but we'll stay on the call and then just share as much as we want after that for a little while. Okay. All right. All right. So every program, we always like to see what you can do. And in this particular case, since we're talking about a person and a person who was so instrumental in conservation here in the state of Tennessee, we have some donation opportunities for you. If you would like to go to the MackPrichard.com website, there is a foundation there to, and actually I'm going to let Randy talk about this page a little bit more. He can give us a lot more detail about what the money goes for, and also talk about this Mack Prichard mobile exhibit that's going to go through the Tennessee State Parks.
Yes, the foundation is an organization that is, its goal is to preserve the photographs, the writings, the programs of Mack doing his thing for everyone to see in the future, to inspire future generations. The foundation is mainly chaired by his sister and his niece there in Cookeville, Tennessee. You can make a donation.
You're actually on the call.
Okay, great. Maybe they'd like to say something about
They
the
were.
foundation too. But they're doing wonderful work cataloging, digitizing his materials for future generations to use. The mobile exhibit is something we're doing in our Department of Interpretation and Education. My friend Hobart Aiken, our state historian at the moment, has this idea of putting together a trailer with exhibit about Mack and his life and his work, so that we can take it to various locations around the state, to parks or events, and set it up, and people can go into the trailer and read and learn about Mack's work and how we benefited from it. So both of these are well worthy of donations and becoming members of the foundation. So I hope everybody will consider it.
Foundation exists to carry on the work that Mack was doing. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Mary Priestley and Norm Mida are gathering materials. If anyone has anything that Mack has written or any material from the past, we would really appreciate a copy in order to share it with them. They're on the foundation board. And the foundation is just a way to carry on Mack's work. And when we are able to raise enough money, then we can purchase property when it's available. So that's what our final goal is, which was so important to Mack.
So I'm putting the information about how to donate and the website in the chat. So if you want to just copy and paste that really quick, you'll have those links to donate to their foundation.
And we would like to have a timeline of what Mack has done. You know, Randy, I really appreciate the dates that you gave and the activities that Mack participated in, because it would be great just to have a timeline of his 50+ years in the state and the people that he worked with and the projects he worked on, because that's what we are trying to compile, is just, his life's work, so that it can be seen by others.
Hey, Lisa, what's his middle name?
Well, this is kind of interesting. You should probably ask my mom.
Let me tell you about that.
That's another story.
When Mac was born, he was named for a distant relative whose name was Mack S. Prichard. Probably back in those days, it was Selim, but they only named him Mack S. So he grew up with the name Mack S. Prichard Jr. So finally, he got so tired of people asking him what S is for, he just said, for Smith, because that was our mother's maiden name. And so illegally, it's Mack Smith Prichard, but it's Mack S. Prichard.
That is too funny.
That is funny.
Well, I have a story, and I would like for it to be noted that he did all he could to help East Tennessee also. My husband and I were living in Chattanooga, and we met him the first time. He gave an outdoor slideshow for John Muir's birthday entitled The Gospel According to John. And we enjoyed that very much. My husband's been interested in, he's a landscape architect that works with greenways, and the city of Chattanooga in the early 1970s in particular, and Mac supported him often there. But during the bicentennial celebration of the state of Tennessee, my mother-in-law was president of the Polk County, Tennessee Historical Society, and they raised money, and their goal was to buy the Nancy Ward, the famous Cherokee beloved woman. Her burial site is on a hill overlooking the Ocoee River. And Mac helped get the state of Tennessee Department of Conservation to purchase that site. And although there's never been a state park established, it's still a beautiful open space for the citizens. And years later, as we would run into him, he would come to the Sandhill Crane weekends often on Hiwassee Island, where they gathered all the Cherokee Indians before the removal began. He would often smile and say, well, I spent the night with Nancy last night, because he would take his sleeping bag and throw it down on the ground beside Nancy Ward's grave and rest for the night. So that's, I think it's a memory that we've shared many times with our friends.
That's a good one. That's a great memory. So if you want to learn more about Mac, we do have some website. Of course, you can always go to the macprichard.com website. And then we have a couple articles here that are very extensive, and we thought you might be interested in learning more about him. So I'm going to put those links out onto the chat, so you can just grab hold of those if you want and read them later. So let me tell you a little bit about what's coming up next month. So this program is the second Thursday of every month, right? So the next one is Thursday, September 9th. And if you look for us on, we always send out a newsletter invitation. We've got it posted on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. So I posted those links out there. Please become our friend. And next month, our program is Reducing Your Family's Exposure to Toxic Substances. Our presenter is our very own Dr. Robert Wingfield. He is a PhD at the university, at Fisk University. He's an associate professor there. He is also the director of the Fisk Community Environmental Toxic Awareness Program and the creator of a family and community emergency preparedness and resilience plan addressing the environmental hazards in our community. He is also on our executive committee here at the Sierra Club Middle Tennessee group. He is extremely knowledgeable, and I'm sure this is definitely going to be a program that will enlighten you in many ways about the toxins that are around us every day. So please join us on September 9th for this program. And I think we have one last closing thought from Mack Prichard. And by the way, this is a picture he took. It's also behind me. It is my Zoom background. But this is a picture that was taken by Mack Prichard, and it's on Roan Mountain. So his statement, which Randy said he said many times, in conservation, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. We don't have time to make all the mistakes ourselves.
Ooh.